I used to think heartbreak was just a metaphor until the day Isabella Morrison walked out of my life, taking with her every dream I'd ever dared to dream. They say first love is unforgettable, but what they don't tell you is that it can haunt you like a ghost that refuses to be laid to rest, whispering, "What if?" in the quiet moments when you least expect it. What they don't tell you is that some people enter your world like a hurricane and leave it forever changed, scarred by beautiful devastation. My name is Alexander Carter, and this is the story of how I learned that the greatest love stories aren't always the ones with happy endings. Sometimes they're the ones that teach you what it means to truly live, even when living feels impossible. It was October 15th, 2019. I remember the exact date because it was the day my carefully ordered world tilted off its axis and never quite found its balance again. I was a junior at Riverside University, majoring in biomedical engineering with a minor in crushing perfectionism and daddy issues I refused to acknowledge. My life was a series of color-coded calendars, precisely calculated GPAs, and a 5-year plan that would make any helicopter parent weep with pride. I had exactly 43 minutes between advanced biomechanics and my research lab when I saw her. She was sitting alone on the steps of the humanities building, surrounded by what looked like the aftermath of an academic tornado. Books, papers, and art supplies were scattered around her like she'd exploded, and she was crying. Not the pretty, delicate tears you see in movies, but real, ugly, soul-deep sobs that made something in my chest crack open. Isabella Morrison, though I wouldn't learn her name until I'd already fallen so hard I forgot which way was up, had paint in her dark hair, ink stains on her fingers, and the kind of raw vulnerability that made me want to both run away and never leave her side. Most people would have walked by. Hell, the old me would have walked by. I had a lab to get to, data to analyze, a future to secure. But something about the way she held her head in her hands, something about the desperate way she was trying to gather her scattered belongings while tears dripped onto her artwork, made me abandon every logical thought I'd ever had. "Hey," I said, crouching down beside her. "Are you okay?" She looked up, and I swear to God, the world stopped. Her eyes were this impossible shade of hazel, flecked with gold and green, and they were swimming with tears that made them look like sea glass. Her face was flushed, her mascara was smudged, and she was absolutely devastating. "Do I look okay?" she asked, and then immediately winced. "Sorry, that was... You're trying to be nice, and I'm being a bitch. I'm fine. I'm totally fine." She was clearly not fine. Her hands were shaking as she tried to stack her papers, and I could see that several of her art pieces, intricate pen and ink drawings that looked like they'd taken hours to complete, were ruined from tears and rain. "Here," I said, starting to help gather her things. "Let me help." "You don't have to. I want to." And that was the truth. Something about this girl, this beautiful disaster of a human being, made me want to fix everything wrong in her world. I carefully collected her drawings, her brushes, her notebooks filled with margin poetry and sketches that revealed a mind both brilliant and beautifully chaotic. "These are incredible," I said, looking at one of her drawings, a detailed anatomical heart surrounded by flowering vines. "Are you an art major?" "Double major," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. Art and pre-med, also known as the fastest way to ensure you never sleep or have a social life. Pre-med? I couldn't hide my surprise. She didn't look like any pre-med student I'd ever met, where we were all stress-induced insomniacs fueled by coffee and anxiety. She looked like she'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting, all flowing lines and artistic chaos. Shocking. I know, she said with a bitter laugh. Apparently, you can want to save lives and create beautiful things at the same time. Who knew? There was pain in her voice, deeper than whatever had caused today's breakdown. I recognized it because I carried something similar. The weight of expectations, the fear of disappointing the people who claimed to love you. "I'm Alexander," I said, handing her the last of her scattered papers. "Alex." "Bella," she replied, and when she smiled, really smiled, not the polite grimace she'd been wearing, my heart did something acrobatic and dangerous. "And thank you for helping. You didn't have to. Like I said, I wanted to." I stood up, offering her my hand. "Can I ask what happened? You know, besides the obvious apocalypse." She took my hand, and the contact sent electricity shooting up my arm. When she was standing, I realized she was taller than I'd expected, probably 5'7" to my 6'2". And she had this way of holding herself that suggested she was used to taking up space in the world. "My advisor," she said, the word dripping with venom. "Dr. Patricia Winters, destroyer of dreams and crusher of souls." Apparently, my artistic tendencies are incompatible with the rigorous demands of medical school, and I need to choose a more realistic path if I want to be taken seriously as a pre-med student. "That's bullshit," I said, and the vehemence in my voice surprised both of us. "Is it?" Bella asked. "Because I'm starting to think she's right. Maybe I am just some delusional art student playing at being a scientist." "Are you kidding me?" I gestured to her drawings. "You just drew an anatomically perfect heart from memory while probably stressed out of your mind. That's not playing. That's being brilliant in multiple ways." She stared at me like I'd just spoken a foreign language. "You don't even know me." "No," I admitted. "But I know talent when I see it. And I know that anyone who can create something that beautiful while simultaneously memorizing the Krebs cycle is pretty much a genius." For the first time since I'd found her crying on those steps, Bella looked like she might believe something good about herself. "You're either very kind or very naive," she said. "Maybe both," I replied. "But I'm also right." She laughed then, a real laugh that transformed her entire face. "Alexander Carter, are you flirting with me?" "Badly, apparently," I said, feeling my cheeks heat up. "But yes." "Well," she said, shouldering her messenger bag and fixing me with a look that made my knees weak. "You're going to have to do better than that if you want to take me to coffee." "Is that a challenge?" "It's an opportunity," she said, already walking away. "Don't waste it." I stood there watching her go, clutching my backpack and grinning like an idiot, completely forgetting that I had a lab to get to, data to analyze, a future to secure. For the first time in my rigidly planned life, none of that seemed to matter. I was 21 years old, and I had just met the girl who was going to ruin me in the most beautiful way possible. That night, I couldn't concentrate on anything. I sat in my apartment, a sterile, organized space that reflected my personality with uncomfortable accuracy, and stared at my biochemistry textbook without reading a single word. All I could think about was hazel eyes and paint-stained fingers, and the way Bella had said my name like it was something worth remembering. My roommate, David Chen, found me like that around midnight, still sitting at my desk, textbook open to the same page I'd been staring at for 3 hours. "Dude," he said, throwing himself onto my bed with the casual confidence of someone who'd been putting up with my neuroses for 2 years. "You look like you've seen a ghost, or a beautiful woman. Actually, knowing you, probably both." "Very funny," I muttered, finally closing the textbook. "I'm serious. What happened? You missed study group. You didn't answer any of my texts, and you've been sitting in the same position for hours. This is not normal Alex behavior." David was right. Normal Alex behavior involved color-coded study schedules, precisely timed breaks, and an obsessive attention to detail that had gotten me through 21 years of life without any major disasters. I didn't skip study groups. I didn't ignore texts. I definitely didn't sit around daydreaming about girls I'd known for exactly 17 minutes. "I met someone today," I said finally. "Okay." David prompted when I didn't continue. "Her name is Bella. She's an art and pre-med double major. She has paint in her hair, and she's the most beautiful person I've ever seen in my life." David sat up, suddenly interested. And nothing. I helped her pick up some stuff she'd dropped. We talked for like 5 minutes, and now I can't stop thinking about her. "Did you get her number?" "No." "Did you ask her out?" "Sort of. Maybe." She mentioned coffee. "Alex," David said with the patience of a saint, "you're an idiot. Thanks for the pep talk. I'm serious. You've been at this school for 3 years, and in all that time, I've never seen you show interest in anyone. You've turned down dates from half the girls in our engineering program. You've missed more social events than a hermit monk, and your idea of a wild Friday night is reorganizing your lab notes. And now you're telling me that some girl you met for 5 minutes has turned you into a lovesick puppy." "I'm not a lovesick puppy," I protested weakly. "You're staring into space with a dreamy expression and sighing every 30 seconds. If you were a cartoon character, there would be little hearts floating around your head." He wasn't wrong, and that terrified me more than I wanted to admit. "What if I screw it up?" I asked. "What if I'm too boring for her? What if she realizes I'm just some uptight engineering student who color codes his sock drawer?" "First of all," David said, "you don't color code your sock drawer. You organize it by fabric weight and season, which is somehow worse. Second of all, you won't know if you don't try. When's the last time you took a real risk?" I thought about it. High school graduation, choosing Riverside over the Ivy League school my parents preferred, switching from pre-med to biomedical engineering during my sophomore year. Actually, That last one had been huge. My parents had not spoken to me for 2 weeks when I called to tell them I was changing majors. My father, Dr. Jonathan Carter, had built his entire identity around having a son who would follow in his footsteps as a cardiovascular surgeon. My mother, Elizabeth, had already started planning my medical school applications before I'd even finished my freshman year. But I'd realized during my first year that I was more interested in building the devices that saved lives than in wielding the scalpels. I wanted to design artificial hearts, not transplant them. I wanted to engineer solutions to medical problems, not just treat their symptoms. It had taken months of arguments, guilt trips, and threats to cut off my tuition before my parents had reluctantly accepted my decision. And even now, 2 years later, every conversation with them included subtle hints about medical school applications and the possibility of switching back. It's been a while, I admitted. Then maybe it's time, David said. What's the worst that could happen? Famous last words. The next morning, I did something completely out of character. I changed my route to class specifically to walk by the humanities building. I told myself I was just curious, that I wanted to see if yesterday had been some kind of stress-induced hallucination. But really, I was hoping to see her again. I didn't. For 3 days, I walked by that building, lingered in the coffee shops she might frequent, even ventured into the art building despite feeling completely out of place among the paint fumes and creative chaos. Nothing. It was David who finally suggested the obvious solution. "Why don't you just look her up in the student directory?" he asked on Thursday night, when he found me planning yet another accidental route past the humanities building. "That's not creepy at all," I said. "It's not creepy, it's efficient. You know her name, you know her majors, you know she goes to this school. The directory is public information." He was right. Of course. 10 minutes later, I had Isabella Morrison's class schedule, her campus email address, and a plan that was either romantic or restraining order material, depending on your perspective. According to the directory, Bella had advanced organic chemistry with Professor Williams on Friday mornings at 10 a.m. The same Professor Williams who taught the class directly before my physical chemistry lab. The same building I was already going to be in. It wasn't stalking if it was convenient. Right? Friday morning, I positioned myself strategically outside the chemistry building, pretending to read while actually watching the entrance like a hawk. At exactly 11:47 a.m., students began streaming out of Professor Williams's classroom, and my heart started racing. Then I saw her. Bella emerged from the building looking harried and beautiful, her dark hair pulled back in a messy bun secured with what looked like a paintbrush. She was wearing ripped jeans, combat boots, and an oversized flannel shirt covered in paint splatters. She had her messenger bag slung across her body and was juggling a coffee cup, her phone, and an armload of books that looked dangerously close to spilling everywhere. It was like watching a disaster in slow motion. I was already moving before I consciously decided to help, catching her organic chemistry textbook just as it slipped from her precarious grip. "Careful there," I said, steadying her elbow as she wobbled on her feet. She looked up, startled, and when she saw me, her face broke into a smile that made my chest tight. "Alexander Carter," she said. and hearing my name in her voice was better than any drug. Are you following me? Would you believe me if I said it was a coincidence? Not even a little bit, she replied, but she was still smiling. Lucky for you, I'm into the stalkery type. I prefer strategically persistent, I said, handing her the textbook. Much better, she agreed. So, was this strategic persistence part of your plan to ask me to coffee? Or are you still working up to that? Actually, I said, and I could feel my carefully rehearsed speech evaporating under the intensity of her attention. I was wondering if you'd like to have lunch with me. Today. If you're free, which you probably aren't, because it's short notice, and I should have... Alex, she interrupted, and the way she said my name made my brain stop working entirely. Yeah? I'd love to have lunch with you. Really? Really. But I have one condition. My stomach dropped. What's that? You have to stop looking so surprised that I said yes. It's not doing wonders for my ego. I laughed, feeling some of the tension leave my shoulders. Deal. Where would you like to go? Surprise me, she said. But nowhere too fancy. I'm covered in paint and probably smell like turpentine. She didn't smell like turpentine. She smelled like vanilla and something floral that made me want to lean closer and figure out exactly what it was. But I managed to restrain myself. I know just the place, I said. Marco's Deli was a hole-in-the-wall sandwich shop about 10 minutes from campus. The kind of place that looked questionable from the outside, but served the best Italian food in the city. I'd discovered it during my freshman year when I was too broke to afford the campus dining plan and too proud to ask my parents for more money. This is your idea of not too fancy? Bella asked as we approached the weathered storefront with its hand-painted sign and window boxes full of dying flowers. Trust me, I said, holding the door open for her. The interior was exactly as I remembered. Mismatched furniture, checkered tablecloths, and the kind of authentic Italian chaos that made you feel like you were eating in someone's grandmother's kitchen. The owner, Marco himself, was behind the counter as always. A large man with graying hair and an apron covered in marinara sauce stains. Alex, he called out when he saw me, spreading his arms wide. Where have you been? You disappear for weeks, and I think maybe you find some other place to eat. Some fancy restaurant that doesn't appreciate you properly. Never. Marco, I said, grinning. Just been busy with school. Marco, I'd like you to meet Bella. Marco's eyes lit up as he took in Bella's paint-splattered appearance and the way she was looking around the restaurant with genuine delight rather than the poorly concealed horror most of my classmates showed when I brought them here. Bella, he repeated, rolling her name around in his mouth like he was tasting wine. A beautiful name for a beautiful girl. Alex, you have excellent taste. Finally. Finally? Bella asked, raising an eyebrow at me. Marco thinks I don't date enough, I explained, feeling my cheeks burn. Marco thinks you don't date at all, Marco corrected cheerfully. In 3 years, you never bring anyone here. Always alone, always studying, always too serious. But now, he gestured broadly at Bella. Now you bring someone who looks like she knows how to have fun. I'm sitting right here, Bella said, but she was laughing. And you're going to sit over there, Marco said, pointing to a corner table with a view of the tiny kitchen. At my best table, and you're going to let me make you the best lunch you've ever had in your life. We should probably look at the menu, I started. No menu, Marco declared. I know what you need. Trust Marco. 20 minutes later, our table was covered with more food than two people could reasonably eat. Homemade pasta with marinara sauce that tasted like sunshine. Crusty bread that was still warm from the oven. A salad that somehow made lettuce taste like the most delicious thing on earth. And wine that Marco insisted was just a little bit, to celebrate Alex finally bringing a girl to meet me. This is incredible, Bella said around a mouthful of pasta. How did you find this place? Broke freshman year, I admitted. Marco took pity on me and fed me for free half the time. I think he was worried I was going to waste away. Were you? Probably. I wasn't exactly skilled at taking care of myself when I first got to college. And now? I considered this. Now I'm moderately skilled at taking care of myself. I can do laundry without turning everything pink. I know how to cook exactly 3 meals, and I haven't given myself food poisoning in over a year. Impressive, Bella said solemnly. Very impressive. What are the 3 meals? Scrambled eggs, grilled cheese, and something I charitably call pasta surprise. What's the surprise? That it's actually edible, she laughed. And the sound went straight to my chest like a physical thing. You're funny, she said, like this was a revelation. Don't sound so surprised. It's just, when I first saw you, you seemed so serious, all buttoned up and responsible looking. I am serious and responsible, I protested. I know. But you're also funny and kind and... She paused, twirling pasta around her fork. You brought me to a restaurant where the owner clearly loves you like family. That says something about who you are. What does it say? That you're the kind of person who inspires love in people. That you're loyal. That you see value in things other people might overlook. I stared at her, fork halfway to my mouth, completely undone by the casual way she'd just described me as someone worth loving. Bella, I said. Yeah? I really want to kiss you right now. She blinked, clearly not expecting that level of honesty. Right now? Here? With Marco watching us like a proud Italian grandfather? I glanced over at Marco, who was indeed watching us with the satisfied expression of someone whose matchmaking efforts were bearing fruit. Maybe not right now, I admitted. But later, she asked, and there was something in her voice that made my heart race. Definitely later. Talk is good, she said, taking a sip of wine and fixing me with a look that made me forget my own name. Because I was starting to think you were all talk and no action. The rest of lunch passed in a blur of easy conversation and growing attraction. We talked about everything and nothing, her double major. I couldn't choose between saving lives and creating beauty, so I decided to do both. My switch from pre-med to engineering. My parents still haven't forgiven me. Our families, our dreams, our fears. I learned that Bella had grown up in a small coastal town in Maine, the daughter of a lobster fisherman and a high school art teacher, that she'd been drawing since she could hold a crayon and had known she wanted to be a doctor since her grandmother died of cancer when Bella was 12, that she saw no contradiction between science and art, that to her, they were both ways of understanding and improving the world. She learned that I'd grown up in suburban Connecticut, the only child of 2 doctors who'd planned my entire life before I was old enough to have opinions about it, that I'd spent my childhood building things, Lego sets, model airplanes, elaborate contraptions designed to solve problems that didn't really exist, that I'd chosen engineering not in spite of my parents' expectations, but because of them. I wanted to save lives the way they did, just differently. "You know what I think?" Bella said as we walked back toward campus, both of us moving slowly to stretch out our time together. "What's that?" "I think we're both rebels pretending to be good kids." "How do you figure?" "You switched majors despite your parents' disapproval. I'm double majoring in 2 fields that everyone says are incompatible. We're both doing exactly what we want to do. We're just doing it politely." She was right, and the realization was both thrilling and terrifying. I'd never thought of myself as rebellious, but maybe that was because my rebellion looked like respectability from the outside. "So what does that make us?" I asked. "Dangerous," she said with a grin that made my knees weak. We'd reached the point where our paths diverged. She had studio time in the art building, and I had lab work to catch up on. Neither of us seemed eager to say goodbye. "I had a really good time today," I said, and immediately felt stupid for how inadequate the words were. "Me too," she replied. "Maybe we could do it again sometime?" "I'd like that. A lot." "Good." She stepped closer, close enough that I could smell her vanilla perfume and see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. "Alex?" "Yeah?" "About that kiss you mentioned." Before I could respond, she rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to mine. It was soft and sweet and over far too quickly, but it was perfect when she pulled away. I was pretty sure I'd forgotten how to breathe. "I'll see you later," she said, already walking backward toward the art building. "When?" I called after her. "Soon," she replied. And then she was gone, leaving me standing on the sidewalk like an idiot with the biggest smile of my life plastered across my face. I was in so much trouble that night. I called my parents for our weekly check-in, something I'd been doing religiously since freshman year, partly out of genuine affection and partly out of guilt-induced obligation. Usually, these calls followed a predictable pattern: updates on my classes, questions about my grades, subtle inquiries about my post-graduation plans, and increasingly less subtle hints about medical school applications. This time was different. "You sound different," my mother said about 10 minutes into the conversation. "Happy. Did something good happen?" "I met someone," I said before I could stop myself. There was a pause. "Someone?" "A girl. Her name is Bella." "Oh." Another pause. "Is she serious about her studies?" Leave it to my mother to make that her first question. Not, "Is she nice?" or "Do you like her?" but "Is she serious about her studies?" "She's double majoring in art and pre-med," I said. "Pre-med?" My mother's voice immediately brightened. "That's wonderful." Alexander, it's so important to find someone who shares your values and ambitions. Actually, Mom, I'm not pre-med anymore. Remember? I switched to biomedical engineering 2 years ago. Of course, dear. But you could always switch back. Especially if you're dating someone who's headed to medical school. It might help you refocus on what's really important. And there it was. Even my love life, apparently, was just another opportunity for my parents to push their agenda. I'm focused, Mom. Just not on the same things you want me to focus on. Chutistu, Alexander, she said in the patient tone she used when she thought I was being deliberately obtuse. You're a brilliant young man with unlimited potential. Don't limit yourself just because you've gotten distracted by some teenage rebellion phase. I'm 21, Mom, and this isn't rebellion. This is me figuring out who I am and what I want. What you want, she repeated. And what about what you owe to your family? What about the opportunities we've given you? What about my happiness? I interrupted, surprising both of us with the vehemence in my voice. Silence. Happiness. My father's voice came through the speaker. He'd been listening on the extension. Is a luxury. Alexander. Success is a necessity. Why can't I have both? Because life doesn't work that way, he said with the authority of someone who'd spent 40 years convinced that suffering was a prerequisite for achievement. You make sacrifices now so you can have security later. Chukutsu, what if I don't want security? What if I want to build something that matters? Medical devices matter, my mother said quickly. You could design surgical equipment, work for a hospital, combine your engineering interests with a medical degree. That's not what I want. Then what do you want? My father asked. It was a simple question, but standing there in my sterile apartment, thinking about paint-stained fingers and hazel eyes and the way Bella had kissed me like I was worth kissing, I realized I was finally ready to answer it. I want to design artificial organs that actually work. I want to build prosthetics that restore function and dignity to people who've lost limbs. I want to create diagnostic tools that can detect diseases before they become terminal. And I want to do it all with someone who understands that life is about more than just achievement. Another long silence. This girl, my mother said finally. This Bella. She's the reason you're being so stubborn about this. No, I said. I'm being stubborn about this because it's my life. Bella just reminds me that I'm allowed to want things that make me happy. Alexander, I have to go, I said. I have studying to do. I hung up before either of them could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline. In 21 years, I'd never hung up on my parents. I'd never directly defied them, never chosen my own wants over their expectations, never put my foot down about anything that really mattered. It felt terrifying and exhilarating and absolutely right. My phone immediately started ringing again, but I ignored it. Instead, I found myself texting Bella. Hey, it's Alex. I know we just saw each other, but I was wondering if you'd like to get coffee tomorrow. I have something I want to tell you. Her response came back almost immediately. Everything okay? You sound serious. Everything's perfect. I just realized something important today. Now I'm intrigued. Coffee sounds great. Meet me at Grind at 10? It's a date. Yes, she texted back. It is. I fell asleep that night with my phone buzzing continuously as my parents tried to call me back. But for the first time in months, I wasn't anxious about disappointing them. I was too busy thinking about tomorrow, about Bella, about the life I was finally brave enough to choose for myself. I should have known it wouldn't be that simple. Coffee at Grind turned into a 4-hour conversation that meandered through half the campus. Bella had arrived wearing a sundress despite the October chill, her hair loose around her shoulders. And when she smiled at me over her cappuccino, I forgot every coherent thought I'd planned to share. So, she said, after we'd covered the basics, her morning studio session, my late-night phone call with my parents, the weather, our weekend plans. What was this important thing you wanted to tell me? I like you, I said, and immediately felt like an idiot for how inadequate the words were. I mean, I really like you. More than I've ever liked anyone. I like you too, she said, looking amused by my obvious nervousness. No. I mean, yesterday, when we had lunch, when you kissed me, I realized that I've been living my life trying to make other people happy, and I forgot that I'm allowed to make myself happy too. Her expression grew more serious. What does that have to do with me? You make me happy, I said simply. Being with you makes me feel like myself, but a better version of myself. Like someone worth knowing. Alex, she said softly. I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other. But I called my parents last night and told them that I'm not going to medical school, that I'm going to keep studying engineering, and that I'm dating someone who reminds me that I'm allowed to want things just because they make me happy. You told them about me? I told them about how you make me feel, how you make me want to be braver. She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee cup like it might contain answers to questions she hadn't asked yet. Alex, she said finally, I need to tell you something. The tone of her voice made my stomach drop. Okay. This is really hard for me. Dating. I mean, letting people get close. Because of your studies? Because of my family? She looked up at me, and I could see something vulnerable and scared in her eyes. My parents have been divorced since I was 16. It was ugly, really ugly. And it made me kind of wary of getting too invested in people. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Everyone says that. I'm not everyone. She smiled, but it was sad around the edges. No, you're not. That's what scares me. Why does that scare you? Because I could really fall for you. Alexander Carter. And falling for someone means trusting them not to leave when things get complicated. Do things always get complicated? In my experience? Yeah. I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were cold despite the warm coffee cup, and I could feel her pulse racing under my thumb. What if this time is different? I asked. What if it's not? Then at least we'll have tried. At least we'll know what this could be. She studied my face for a long moment, like she was trying to read my intentions in my expression. Okay, she said finally. Okay? Okay. Let's try. Let's see what this could be. But I have conditions. Name them. First, we take this slow. I don't do casual hookups. But I also don't do love at first sight fairy tales. If this is going to work, it has to be real. Agreed. Second, we're honest with each other about everything. No games, no pretending to be someone we're not, no trying to be the person we think the other person wants. Definitely agreed. Third, she said, and her voice got softer, more vulnerable. If one of us decides this isn't working, we tell the other person, no ghosting, no slow fade, no making the other person guess. Promise me that if you want out, you'll just say so. The fact that she felt she needed to ask for that promise broke something in my chest. I promise, I said. Do you promise the same thing? I promise. Good. Now I have a condition. What's that? Kiss me again. She laughed, the tension breaking. Right here, in front of all these people. Right here. Right now. You're very demanding for someone who was stuttering over coffee 5 minutes ago. You bring out my confident side. I like your confident side, she said, leaning across the table. This kiss was different from the one the day before. Deeper, more certain, full of promise and possibility. When we broke apart, the entire coffee shop could have been on fire, and I wouldn't have noticed. Damn, Bella said, touching her lips with her fingertips. Good damn or bad damn? Definitely good damn. That was the beginning of everything. The next 6 weeks were the happiest of my life. Bella and I fell into a routine that felt as natural as breathing. Morning coffee dates when our schedules aligned. Afternoon study sessions in the library. Evening walks around campus when we both needed a break from books and labs and the constant pressure of academic achievement. I learned that Bella hummed when she was concentrating, that she painted when she was stressed, that she cried during sad movies and got irrationally angry at people who littered. I learned that she was fiercely loyal to the people she loved, brilliantly creative in everything she did, and brave in ways that made me want to be braver too. She learned that I was more fun than I looked, that I made terrible puns when I was nervous, that I had an inexplicable fear of butterflies that dated back to a traumatic childhood incident at a butterfly conservatory. She learned that I was desperately afraid of disappointing people, that I'd never been in a serious relationship because I'd been too focused on school, and that I'd never felt more like myself than I did when I was with her. We introduced each other to our friends, our favorite places, our secret dreams and embarrassing stories. Bella fit seamlessly into my life. Charming David with her dry humor, and impressed Marco with her genuine appreciation for his cooking. She even managed to make my study group more bearable by bringing homemade cookies and asking questions that made everyone think differently about the material. I fit into her world too, though it was a world unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Her friends were artists and musicians, theater majors and philosophy students, people who stayed up until 3 a.m. debating the meaning of life and the merits of various artistic movements. They welcomed me despite my obvious outsider status, and Bella seemed proud to have me there, introducing me as Alex, my brilliant engineer boyfriend, in a way that made my chest tight with happiness. Because that's what I was, her boyfriend. We'd made it official after 2 weeks of dating. A conversation that happened naturally after she'd spent the night in my apartment, curled up against my side while we watched old movies and ate takeout Chinese food. "Alex," she'd said during a lull in the conversation, her head pillowed on my chest. What are we doing here?" "Watching The Princess Bride for the 3rd time this week." "Apparently." "No. I mean, what are we doing? You and me." I'd looked down at her, at the way her hair caught the light from the TV, at the relaxed happiness in her expression, and felt something settle into place in my chest. "I think we're falling in love," I'd said. "I think you're right," she'd replied. "Is that okay?" "It's more than okay. It's perfect." She'd tilted her head up to look at me then. "So we're doing this? We're really doing this? We're really doing this? Good," she'd said, settling back against my chest. "Because I was getting tired of calling you the guy I'm seeing. What will you call me now?" "Mine," she'd said simply, and that word had rewritten my entire understanding of happiness. We were careful with each other in those early weeks, both of us conscious of the promises we'd made about honesty and taking things slow. But careful didn't mean distant, if anything. The deliberate way we approached our relationship made every moment feel more significant, every milestone more meaningful. Our first "I love you" happened on a Thursday night in November. We were in Bella's dorm room, supposedly studying for upcoming midterms, but actually just talking about everything and nothing. She was cross-legged on her bed, wearing one of my hoodies and painting her nails a deep purple color that somehow looked perfect on her. I was on the floor, surrounded by engineering textbooks and trying to solve a particularly complex problem involving fluid dynamics and artificial heart valves. "Alex," she said suddenly. "Yeah? I love you." I looked up from my textbook, certain I'd misheard. "What?" "I love you," she repeated, not looking up from her nails. "I know we said we'd take things slow, and I know it's only been 6 weeks, but I love you, and I wanted you to know." I stared at her, this beautiful, brilliant, brave woman who had just casually rewrote my entire life with 4 simple words. "I love you too," I said, and the words felt like coming home. She looked up then, her eyes bright and happy. "Really? Really? I've loved you since that first day when you challenged me to ask you to coffee. Maybe even before that. That's not possible. Isn't it?" I closed my textbook and moved to sit beside her on the bed. "I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you crying on those steps, and I've been falling ever since." "That's very romantic," she said, leaning into my side. "I have my moments." "Yes, you do." We sat there in comfortable silence, her head on my shoulder, both of us processing the weight and joy of what we'd just acknowledged. I felt like I could conquer the world, like I could solve every engineering problem that had ever existed, like I could do anything as long as she was beside me. "Alex," she said after a while. "Yeah?" I'm really glad you helped me pick up my papers that day. Me too. Even though I was a complete disaster? Especially because you were a complete disaster. She laughed, and the sound filled up all the empty spaces in my chest that I hadn't even known existed. I love you, she said again, like she was testing out the words. I love you too, I replied, and meant it with every fiber of my being. If I could have frozen time in that moment, if I could have made that Thursday night in November last forever, I would have, because in that moment, everything was perfect. Everything was exactly as it should be. I had no way of knowing that in less than 2 months, our perfect love story would become a beautiful tragedy, and that I would spend the next 3 years learning how to live with a broken heart that refused to heal. But I'm getting ahead of myself. December arrived like a freight train, bringing with it final exams, project deadlines, and the looming specter of winter break. For most students, winter break was a welcome respite. 3 weeks of sleeping in, home-cooked meals, and freedom from academic pressure. For me, it represented something more complicated. 3 weeks away from Bella. 3 weeks back in my parents' house. 3 weeks of pretending I was still the dutiful son who followed the path they'd laid out for me. Bella and I had talked about the separation, of course. She was going home to Maine to spend Christmas with her family and work at her father's lobster boat business to earn money for next semester. I was expected in Connecticut for the mandatory Carter family Christmas celebration, complete with extended family, professional networking opportunities disguised as social gatherings, and subtle interrogations about my future plans. It's only 3 weeks, Bella said as we packed up her dorm room on the last day of finals. We'll talk every day. I know, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. It's just, my parents are going to be impossible. About what? About everything. My major, my grades, my post-graduation plans. They've been relatively quiet since our last phone call, but I know they're planning something. Bella paused in her packing, a sweater half folded in her hands. What kind of something? I don't know, but my mom has been dropping hints about a special Christmas surprise for weeks. And in my family, surprises are rarely good news. Maybe it'll be nice, she said, but she didn't sound convinced. Maybe. I watched her carefully fold the sweater, one of mine that she'd claimed after our 3rd date. Bella? Yeah? Whatever happens over break, whatever my parents say or do, it doesn't change anything between us. You know that, right? She stopped packing and turned to face me fully. Are you expecting them to try to change something? I'm expecting them to try to change everything, I said honestly. But I won't let them. Promise? Promise. She crossed the room and kissed me, soft and sweet and full of trust that made my chest ache with how much I loved her. I'll miss you, she said against my lips. I'll miss you too. Call me when you get home? The second I walk through the door. Good. She smiled, but there was something worried in her eyes that I couldn't quite identify. Alex? Yeah? I love you. No matter what happens over the next 3 weeks, I love you. I love you too. Looking back, I think some part of her already knew what was coming. Bella had always been more intuitive than me, more attuned to the subtle undercurrents of emotion and intention that I missed entirely. Maybe she sensed the storm gathering before I did. Maybe she was already bracing for impact. Or maybe I'm just looking for signs that weren't there, trying to make sense of what happened next by finding clues that existed only in hindsight. The first week of winter break was exactly as awful as I'd expected. My parents had invited their entire social circle to our annual Christmas party. Doctors, lawyers, successful business people who could provide networking opportunities and career guidance for their wayward son. I spent 3 hours in a suit, making polite conversation with people who asked pointed questions about my major and looked disappointed when I answered honestly. Engineering, repeated Dr. Patricia Hamilton, one of my mother's oldest friends. How? Practical. And what do you plan to do with that? I want to design medical devices, I said for the 10th time that evening. Artificial organs, prosthetics, diagnostic equipment. Oh. She looked confused. Why not just become a doctor? Wouldn't that be more direct? Because I'm more interested in building the tools than using them. But surely your parents must want. My parents want what's best for me, I interrupted. Though I wasn't entirely sure that was true. The conversation continued in that vein for most of the evening. By the time the last guest left, I was exhausted and frustrated and missing Bella with an intensity that felt physical. I called her from my childhood bedroom, surrounded by debate team trophies and science fair awards that felt like artifacts from someone else's life. "How was the party?" she asked, and just hearing her voice made some of the tension leave my shoulders. "Awful," I said honestly. 3 hours of explaining why I don't want to be a doctor to people who couldn't fathom any other path to success. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault. How was your day?" "Good. Actually." I spent the morning on the boat with my dad, and this afternoon I worked on a new painting. It's inspired by that view from the library where we always study. You know, the one that looks out over the quad. I love that view. I love that we discovered it together. We talked for 2 hours about her painting and my family obligations, about our classes next semester and our plans for when she got back. By the time we hung up, I felt like myself again instead of the stressed, unhappy person my family brought out in me. That pattern continued for the rest of the first week. Days filled with family obligations and thinly veiled disappointment. Evenings spent talking to Bella until I remembered who I was and what I wanted. The bomb dropped on December 23rd. I was in the kitchen, helping my mother prepare for Christmas Eve dinner, when she casually mentioned that they'd invited a special guest to join us for the meal. "Who?" I asked, not really paying attention. I was focused on chopping vegetables and counting down the days until I could go back to school. "Dr. Amanda Richardson," my mother said, and something in her tone made me look up. "Should I know who that is?" "She's the daughter of your father's medical school roommate. She just finished her first semester at Harvard Medical School, and she's home for the holidays. I thought it would be nice for you two to meet." Warning bells started going off in my head. Why would it be nice for us to meet? "Well," my mother said, not meeting my eyes. "She's a lovely girl, very accomplished, and you two have so much in common." "Mom," I said carefully, "are you trying to set me up?" "I'm trying to introduce you to someone who shares your interests and ambitions." I have a girlfriend. You have a distraction, my mother corrected. This Bella person is clearly very sweet, but she's not serious about her future. Art and pre-med? That's not a real plan. Alexander. That's the kind of indecision that leads to mediocrity. I set down my knife, my hands shaking with the effort it took not to start shouting. Bella is the most focused person I know. She's double majoring because she's brilliant enough to excel at both, not because she's indecisive. Alexander, my father said, entering the kitchen at exactly the wrong moment. Your mother and I have been talking, and we think it's time you started taking your future more seriously. I take my future very seriously. Do you? He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, looking every inch the successful physician who'd never had a moment of doubt about his path in life. Because from where we sit, it looks like you're playing house with some girl instead of focusing on your career. I'm getting excellent grades. I'm conducting research with Professor Martinez, and I have a clear plan for graduate school, I said. How is that not taking my future seriously? Because it's the wrong future, my mother said gently. Sweetheart, you're brilliant. You could be anything you want to be. Why limit yourself to building machines when you could be saving lives directly? I am saving lives, just differently than you want me to. And this girl, my father continued as if I hadn't spoken. This Bella, what kind of future can she offer you? What kind of life are you going to build with someone who can't even commit to one career path? The kind of life where I'm happy, I said. The kind of life where I wake up excited about my work and excited about the person I'm sharing it with. My parents exchanged a look that I'd seen 1,000 times before. The look that said their son was being naive and they needed to save him from himself. Alexander, my mother said. Dr. Richardson is coming to dinner tomorrow whether you like it or not. All we're asking is that you be polite to her. And if I refuse, then you'll be reminded that your tuition, your housing, your entire education is contingent on your father's and my generosity, my father said quietly. And that generosity has limits. The threat hung in the air between us, unspoken but crystal clear. Be polite to Dr. Richardson, or find a way to pay for college yourself. I thought about Bella, working on her father's lobster boat to earn money for next semester. I thought about the student loans I'd managed to avoid, thanks to my parents' financial support. I thought about how much it would cost to finish my degree without their help. Fine, I said. I'll be polite. But I won't pretend to be interested in someone when I'm in love with someone else. We'll see about that, my mother said, and the confidence in her voice made my blood run cold. I called Bella that night, but the conversation was stilted and difficult. I couldn't bring myself to tell her about Dr. Richardson or my parents' threats, partly because I was ashamed of my family's behavior, and partly because I was afraid of what she might say. Would she understand that I had no choice but to play along? Would she see it as a betrayal? Would she start to doubt my commitment to our relationship? Everything okay? She asked halfway through the call. You seem distracted. Just family stuff, I said. You know how it is. Yeah, she said. But there was something in her voice that suggested she didn't entirely believe me. Alex? Yeah? You'd tell me if something was wrong, right? If your parents were giving you a hard time about us? Of course. I lied, hating myself for it. Good. Because I know this is hard. Being away from each other. Being back in our family bubbles. I just want to make sure we're still okay. We're okay, I said, and hoped it was true. We're more than okay. I love you. I love you too. But as I hung up the phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made a terrible mistake. Bella had asked me to be honest with her, and I'd lied. Not about my feelings, those were truer than anything, but about the situation, about the pressure I was under, about the choice I might soon be forced to make. I told myself it was just one dinner. I told myself I could get through it without compromising my relationship or my integrity. I told myself that my parents would see how committed I was to Bella and back off. I was wrong about everything. Dr. Amanda Richardson arrived at exactly 6 p.m. on Christmas Eve, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the kind of understated elegance that screamed expensive education and careful breeding. She was beautiful in the way that women from wealthy families often were, polished, poised, genetically blessed with good bone structure and the confidence that came from never having to worry about money. She was also brilliant, charming, and exactly the kind of person my parents had always hoped I would date. "Alexander," she said when my mother introduced us, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I've heard so much about you. All good things? I hope," I replied, automatically falling into the polite social patterns my upbringing had drilled into me. "Your mother tells me you're studying biomedical engineering. That's fascinating. I've been thinking about specializing in surgical technology myself." And just like that, the trap was sprung. Dinner was a nightmare of forced conversation and obvious manipulation. Amanda was perfectly pleasant, intelligent, funny, genuinely interested in my work, which somehow made the whole situation worse. If she'd been awful, I could have dismissed my parents' matchmaking attempts as obviously misguided. But she wasn't awful. She was the kind of person I might have been attracted to if I'd never met Bella. The kind of person who made sense on paper, even if she didn't make my heart race. My parents orchestrated the evening with surgical precision. They seated us next to each other, steered the conversation toward topics we had in common, and created opportunities for us to talk privately. By the time dessert arrived, it was clear that Amanda was interested, and my parents were thrilled. "Alexander," my father said as we cleared the table, "why don't you show Amanda the garden? I know she mentioned an interest in landscaping." It wasn't really a suggestion. The garden was my mother's pride and joy. A carefully manicured space that looked beautiful even in December. Amanda and I walked the paths in awkward silence until she finally broke the tension. "This is weird, isn't it?" she said. "Very weird." I agreed, grateful for her honesty. "Your parents are not exactly subtle in their matchmaking attempts." "No, they're not. I'm sorry you got dragged into this." She stopped walking and turned to face me. "Alexander. Can I call you Alex? I'm going to be direct with you because I hate games and I suspect you do too. Please." Your parents told my parents that you were single and brilliant and in need of some guidance about your future. They painted a picture of someone who was a little lost, maybe making some poor choices about women, someone who could benefit from meeting someone with similar goals and values. My stomach dropped. And what did you find instead? Someone who's clearly head over heels in love with someone else, she said with a small smile. You've mentioned this Bella person 3 times in the last hour, and your face completely lights up when you talk about her. I'm sorry, I said, feeling my cheeks burn. I didn't mean to. Don't apologize. It's actually really sweet. But it also means this whole setup is pointless, doesn't it? Yeah, it is. Uzio, so why are you going along with it? I looked back toward the house, where my parents were probably discussing wedding venues and grandchildren, and felt trapped in a way that made it hard to breathe. Because they're paying for my education, I said honestly. And because saying no to my parents has never been an option in my family. Amanda nodded like she understood. Wealthy parent problems, something like that. For what it's worth, she said, I think you should follow your heart. Money isn't everything, and medical school isn't the only path to a meaningful career. Don't let them bully you into becoming someone you're not. Even if that means disappointing them? Especially if it means disappointing them. Trust me, I've spent 24 years trying to make my parents happy, and I've learned that their approval is never enough to compensate for your own misery. We talked for another hour, and by the time we went back inside, I felt like I'd found an unexpected ally. Amanda was smart enough to play along with my parents' expectations for the rest of the evening, while making it clear to me that she wasn't interested in pursuing anything romantic. It was lovely to meet you, Alexander, she said as she was leaving, with exactly the right amount of warmth to satisfy my parents without encouraging them. I hope you'll stay in touch. You too, I replied, and meant it in a completely platonic way. After she left, my parents cornered me in the living room with expressions of barely contained excitement. Well, my mother asked, what did you think? She's nice, I said carefully. Nice? My father repeated. Alexander, that woman is perfect for you. She's intelligent, accomplished, from a good family, headed to exactly the same career path you should be on. I'm not headed to medical school, Dad. You could be, my mother said. It's not too late to change your major, to take the MCATs, to apply for next year's entering class. Amanda could help you study, introduce you to the right people. I don't want to go to medical school. You don't know what you want, my father said with the patronizing tone that always made my blood pressure spike. You're 21 years old and you're thinking with your hormones instead of your brain. I'm thinking with my heart, I said, and my brain, both of which are telling me that I'm happy with my choices. Your choices, my mother repeated. You mean this Bella person? I mean my major, my career plans, my relationship, all of it. Alexander, my father said, sitting down across from me with the expression he wore when delivering difficult diagnoses to patients. Your mother and I have been talking, and we've decided that it's time for some tough love. What does that mean? It means that if you insist on continuing down this path, this engineering nonsense, this relationship with someone who has no serious prospects, then you're going to do it without our financial support." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're cutting me off?" "We're giving you a choice," my mother said gently. "Continue to make poor decisions and face the consequences, or accept our guidance and let us help you build the future you deserve." The future I deserve, or the future you want, they're the same thing, my father said with absolute certainty. I sat there in the living room where I'd spent countless Christmas mornings, surrounded by family photos and expensive furniture and the trappings of a life I'd never questioned, until I met a girl who showed me what happiness looked like and realized that my parents were serious. They would actually cut me off financially if I didn't break up with Bella and switch back to pre-med. "How long do I have to decide?" I asked. "Until the end of winter break," my mother said. "We want an answer before you go back to school. And if I choose Bella and engineering, then you'll figure out how to pay for your last year and a half of college yourself," my father said. "And you'll do it without our help or support. And if I choose what you want, then we'll pay for the rest of your undergraduate degree, help you prepare for medical school, and introduce you to people who can help you build a successful career." It was an ultimatum disguised as a choice, and we all knew it. I went to bed that night, feeling like my entire world was crumbling around me. I wanted to call Bella, to hear her voice, to remind myself why this choice should be easy, but it was late, and she was probably asleep, and part of me was terrified that she would hear the doubt in my voice and start to question everything too. Instead, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how I'd gotten to a place where loving someone felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. The next week was torture. I went through the motions of Christmas celebrations and family obligations, while my parents' ultimatum hung over everything like a storm cloud. They didn't mention it again, but I could feel them watching me, waiting for my decision, confident that logic and financial pressure would eventually win out over emotion. I researched student loans, work-study programs, scholarship opportunities, anything that might help me finish my degree without their support. The numbers were daunting, but not impossible. I could do it. Barely. If I was willing to graduate with significant debt and work part-time while finishing school. But that was just the financial cost. There would be other consequences too. The disappointment of my extended family. The social awkwardness of explaining why my parents had disowned me. The constant stress of wondering if I was making the right choice. Was my relationship with Bella worth all of that? Was any relationship worth sacrificing my family and my financial security? The rational part of my brain, the part that had been carefully cultivated by 21 years of privilege and pragmatism, whispered that maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was too young to make this kind of decision. Maybe I was confusing infatuation with love. Maybe Bella and I would break up anyway, and I'd have sacrificed everything for nothing. But then I would remember the way she looked when she was concentrating on a painting, or the sound of her laugh when I told a particularly bad joke, or the way she'd kissed me and told me she loved me. And none of the rational arguments mattered. I called her on December 30th, unable to bear the weight of my secret any longer. "Alex," she said, and the joy in her voice when she heard from me made my chest ache. "I was just thinking about you. How was Christmas?" "Complicated," I said. And then, before I could lose my courage, "Bella, I need to tell you something. The change in her tone was immediate. "What's wrong?" I told her everything. The dinner with Amanda, my parents' ultimatum, the choice I was being forced to make. With every word, I could feel her pulling away from me, even though she was hundreds of miles away. "So," she said when I finished, her voice carefully neutral, "your parents want you to break up with me. My parents want a lot of things that aren't going to happen, but they're threatening to cut you off financially if you don't." "Oh, yes, Alex," she said quietly. "That's a lot of money. I don't care about the money. You should care about the money. Do you have any idea how much student loans you'd need to take out? How much debt you'd graduate with? I've looked into it. It's manageable. Manageable for you, maybe. But what about grad school? What about when we graduate and you're starting your career with a mountain of debt? What about Bella?" I interrupted. "Are you trying to talk me into breaking up with you? I'm trying to be realistic about what this would cost you. It would cost me my family's approval and some money. That's it." "That's it?" she repeated, and there was something sharp in her voice now. "Alex, you're talking about throwing away your relationship with your parents, your financial security, your entire support system. For me, for us. What if we don't work out?" The question hung in the air between us, poisonous and impossible to ignore. "What if we do work out?" I countered. "What if we don't?" she pressed. "What if we graduate and realize we want different things? What if we break up in 6 months, or a year, or 5 years? What if you wake up one day and regret everything you gave up for me? I won't. You don't know that. I know that I love you. I know that what we have is real and rare and worth fighting for." "Alex," she said, and now she was crying. "I love you too, so much that it scares me. But I can't be the reason you destroy your relationship with your family. You're not the reason, they are. It doesn't matter whose fault it is. The result is the same." "What are you saying?" There was a long pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was so quiet I had to strain to hear her. "I'm saying that maybe your parents are right. Maybe we're too young for this kind of decision. Maybe we should take a break until you figure out what you really want." "I know what I want," I said desperately. "I want you. You want me now. But what about in 5 years? When you're drowning in student loan debt and I'm in medical school and we're both stressed and broke and wondering if this was all a mistake? That won't happen. You don't know that," she said again. "God, Alex, you don't know anything. We don't know anything. We've been together for 4 months. 4 months. And you're ready to give up everything for me?" "Yes." "Well, I'm not ready to let you." The words hit me like a slap. "What does that mean?" "It means that I think you should take your parents' offer. Go back to pre-med. Date Amanda or someone like her. Build the life they want for you. And what about us? There is no us if it means you have to choose between me and everything else you care about. You are everything else I care about." "I'm not," she said firmly. "I'm one person. I'm not worth sacrificing your entire future. Let me decide what you're worth to me." "No," she said, and there was steel in her voice now. I won't be responsible for you making a choice you'll regret. I won't be the reason you hate your life in 10 years. Bella, please. I have to go, she said. I need to think. We both need to think. Don't do this, I begged. Please don't do this. I'll call you tomorrow, she said. But something in her tone told me that wasn't true. Bella, I love you, she said. Remember that. Okay? Whatever happens, I love you. And then she hung up. I tried calling her back immediately, but she didn't answer. I tried texting, leaving voicemails, even reached out to her friends, but no one had heard from her. For 3 days, I existed in a state of panic and desperation, checking my phone constantly and jumping every time it made a sound. On January 2nd, she finally texted me back. I'm sorry I disappeared. I needed time to think. Can we talk tonight? I called her the second I got the message. Hi, she said, and her voice sounded different, distant, resolved. Hi, I replied. Are you okay? I'm okay. Are you? No. I've been going crazy not hearing from you. I'm sorry. I needed to figure some things out. And what did you figure out? There was a long pause, and in that silence, I already knew what she was going to say. I think we should break up, she said quietly. No. Alex. No. I repeated. I won't accept that. I love you. You love me. And we can figure everything else out together. We can't, she said. Alex, I've spent the last 3 days thinking about this from every possible angle. And there's no scenario where this ends well for both of us. What do you mean? I mean that if you choose me over your family, you'll resent me eventually. Maybe not now. Maybe not next year. But someday, when things get hard and money is tight and you realize what you gave up. And if you choose your family over me, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering if I was worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. Not like this, she said. Not when fighting for me means destroying everything else in your life. It doesn't have to destroy everything else. Doesn't it? Alex, be honest with me. If you choose me, if you take out loans and finish school without your parents' support, what happens to us after graduation? We build a life together. How? You'll be in debt. I'll be starting medical school. We'll both be broke and stressed and trying to figure out our careers. That's not exactly the foundation for a healthy relationship. Other people make it work. Other people don't have parents who've essentially disowned them for their choice in romantic partners. Alex, you'll always wonder if you made the right decision. And I'll always feel guilty for being the reason you had to make that choice in the first place. I wanted to argue with her, to convince her that she was wrong, that love could conquer all the practical obstacles she was laying out. But deep down, in the part of my brain that I didn't want to acknowledge, I knew she was right about at least some of it. So what? I asked. We just give up? We throw away something real and beautiful because it's inconvenient? We give up something real and beautiful because we love each other enough to want what's best for each other, even when it hurts. What's best for me is being with you. What's best for you is having a relationship with your family, financial security, and a clear path to the career you want. What's best for me is not being the person who cost you all of those things. Bella, I've made up my mind, she said, and there was finality in her voice that scared me. I'm not coming back to school next semester. What? I'm transferring to the University of Maine. I can finish my degrees there, and I'll be closer to my family. You're running away. I'm making a clean break before this gets any messier than it already is. This is insane, I said, my voice rising. You're throwing away your entire life here because my parents are being unreasonable. I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing a different path, one that doesn't put either of us in an impossible position. What if I choose you anyway? What if I tell my parents to go to hell and take out the loans and finish my degree on my own? Then you'll do it without me, she said quietly, because I won't be the reason you make that choice. So you're just going to disappear? Leave without saying goodbye? I'm saying goodbye now. This isn't goodbye, I said desperately. This is you panicking and making decisions based on fear instead of love. Maybe, she admitted. But I'd rather make decisions based on fear than watch you make a choice you'll regret for the rest of your life. I won't regret choosing you. You don't know that. And you don't know that I will. You're right, she said. I don't know anything for certain. But I know that if we stay together, one of us is going to get hurt. Either you're going to sacrifice your family and your financial security for me, or I'm going to spend the rest of our relationship feeling guilty about it. Either way, we lose. So we both lose anyway. Just more immediately? Yes. The simple honesty of her answer broke something in my chest. I love you, I said. One last desperate attempt. I love you too, she replied. That's why I'm doing this. Bella. Goodbye, Alex, she said. And then, for the second time in 4 days, she hung up on me. This time, when I tried to call her back, her phone went straight to voicemail. When I tried texting, the messages went undelivered. She had blocked me completely and thoroughly, cutting off every avenue of communication between us. I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by the artifacts of a life that no longer felt like mine, and realized that the girl I loved had just walked out of my life forever. The person who stumbled back to Riverside University in January was barely recognizable as the confident, happy young man who had left in December. I was hollow, mechanical, going through the motions of academic life while feeling like someone had reached into my chest and removed all the vital organs. Bella was gone. Not just out of my life, but literally gone from campus. Her dorm room was empty. Her spot in organic chemistry was filled by a transfer student. Her friends looked at me with a mixture of pity and awkwardness when our paths crossed. It was like she had never existed at all, except for the ache in my chest that reminded me every waking moment of what I had lost. David tried to help. He brought me food when I forgot to eat, dragged me to social events when I would have preferred to hide in my room, and listened with infinite patience as I replayed every conversation, every moment, every sign I might have missed that this was coming. "You have to talk to your parents," he said one night in February, when he found me staring at my phone, contemplating sending Bella another message that would probably never be delivered. "What's the point?" I asked. "She's gone." "The point is that they're the reason she's gone. And maybe if you explain to them what they've cost you, they'll realize how fucked up this whole situation is. They won't care. They'll probably be relieved. You don't know that." But I did know that. I'd spoken to my parents exactly once since returning to school. A stilted conversation during which they asked about my decision, and I told them I needed more time to think. They were giving me space, confident that Bella's absence would eventually bring me around to their point of view. In some ways, they were right. Without Bella, the choice they were offering me seemed less significant. What was the point of taking out massive loans and destroying my relationship with my family for a future that no longer included the person I'd wanted to share it with? But in other ways, they were spectacularly wrong, because losing Bella hadn't made me want to become a doctor. It had made me want to prove to myself that I was capable of following my own path, even when it was difficult, even when it hurt. So I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I applied for financial aid, researched scholarship opportunities, and found a part-time job in Professor Martinez's lab that would help cover my expenses. I mapped out a plan for finishing my degree without my parents' financial support, and then I called them to tell them about my decision. "Alexander," my mother said when I finished explaining my plan, "you're being ridiculous. This whole elaborate scheme to prove some kind of point, it's not a scheme. Mom, it's my life. It's a life built on stubbornness and pride instead of common sense. It's a life built on my choices instead of yours." "And how did that work out for you?" my father asked pointedly. "Your girlfriend left anyway, didn't she? You've thrown away our support for someone who didn't even have the courage to fight for your relationship." The words hit their intended target, and for a moment I was too hurt and angry to respond. "She left because she loved me enough to want what was best for me," I said finally. "Something you apparently don't understand. We want what's best for you too," my mother said. "We've always wanted what's best for you." "No," I said. "You've always wanted what's best for your idea of who I should be. There's a difference." "Alexander, I'm done," I said. "I'm done trying to be the son you want instead of the person I am. I'm finishing my degree in biomedical engineering. I'm paying for it myself, and I'm going to build a career that makes me proud, even if it disappoints you. And you're willing to throw away your family for this fantasy?" "I'm not throwing away my family. You are. You're choosing your expectations over your son." There was a long silence. "If that's your final decision," my father said eventually, "then we have nothing more to discuss. I guess we don't. Don't call us again until you're ready to apologize and ask for our help," my mother added. "Then I guess I won't be calling." I hung up and immediately burst into tears, grieving not just for Bella, but for the parents I'd lost, for the family that had apparently never really existed in the first place. In the span of 2 months, I'd lost everyone I loved, and I was starting my junior year completely alone. But I wasn't as alone as I thought. Professor Martinez, when I explained my situation, offered me additional research opportunities and helped me apply for academic scholarships I hadn't known existed. David organized a support network of friends who made sure I ate regular meals and didn't spend all my time alone in my room. Marco, when I finally worked up the courage to visit the deli, hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack and refused to let me pay for my meal. Family, he said when I tried to argue about the bill, is not just people who share your blood. Family is people who choose to love you, even when you make stupid decisions. I didn't make a stupid decision, I protested. No, he agreed. But they did. Slowly, painfully, I began to rebuild my life around the hole that Bella and my parents had left. I threw myself into my studies, working harder than I ever had before, determined to prove that I could succeed on my own terms. I took on additional research projects, applied for internships, and began planning for graduate school with the single-minded focus of someone who had nothing left to lose. I didn't date. I couldn't even imagine being interested in anyone else. Couldn't fathom the possibility that someone else might make me feel the way Bella had. David tried to set me up a few times, but I always found excuses to avoid the blind dates and group outings he organized. "You can't mourn her forever," he said one night in March, when I'd turned down yet another invitation to a party where he'd promised to introduce me to someone perfect for you. "I'm not mourning her." I lied. "I'm just focused on school. You're hiding from life. I'm building a life. A life without love, without connection, without joy. That's not living. Alex, that's existing." He was right, but I wasn't ready to admit it. I was afraid that if I opened my heart to someone else, I would discover that what I'd felt for Bella hadn't been as special as I'd thought. I was afraid that if I tried to move on, I would be betraying the memory of what we'd had together. But mostly, I was afraid that I would never feel that way about anyone again, and that the rest of my life would be a pale imitation of those 4 perfect months when I'd understood what happiness felt like. Spring semester passed in a blur of lab work, job applications, and sleepless nights. I maintained my grades, impressed my professors, and began to see a path forward that didn't include my parents' financial support. It wasn't easy, but it was possible. And there was something satisfying about proving to myself that I could do it alone. I graduated magna cum laude in May, 2 years later, with a degree in biomedical engineering and acceptance to a prestigious graduate program at MIT. My parents didn't attend the ceremony. I hadn't told them about it, and they hadn't asked. David's family adopted me for the day, cheering louder than anyone when my name was called and taking pictures that I would treasure for years to come. "So what now?" David asked as we packed up our apartment, both of us preparing to move on to the next phase of our lives. "Grad school," I said. "Research. Eventually. Maybe my own company designing medical devices." "And personally? What do you mean?" "I mean, when are you going to stop punishing yourself for falling in love with someone who loved you enough to let you go?" I looked at him, this friend who had seen me through the worst period of my life, who had never once made me feel like a burden despite my obvious misery. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe never." "That's a waste," he said. "You're a good man. Alex, you deserve to be happy." I was happy for 4 months. I was happier than I ever thought possible. Maybe that's enough for one lifetime. Maybe, he said. Or maybe it's just the beginning. I moved to Boston that summer and threw myself into graduate school with the same intensity I'd brought to everything else since Bella left. I was a good student, a dedicated researcher, a promising young scientist with a bright future ahead of him. I made friends, earned respect from my professors, and began to build the kind of career my parents had always wanted for me. Just not in the way they'd envisioned. But late at night, when the lab was empty and the city was quiet, I would find myself thinking about paint-stained fingers and hazel eyes and the way someone had once said my name like it was something precious. I would wonder what she was doing, whether she'd finished her degrees, whether she'd gotten into medical school, whether she was happy. I would wonder if she ever thought about me too. It wasn't until my second year of graduate school that I learned the answer to that question. I was at a biomedical engineering conference in Chicago, presenting my research on artificial heart valve design, when I saw a familiar face in the audience. Dr. Sarah Chen, Bella's friend from college, now apparently a medical student herself. We recognized each other immediately, and after my presentation, she approached me with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Alex," she said, "I thought that was you. How are you?" "I'm good," I said, though my heart was racing. "Really good. Med school treating you well?" "It's challenging, but I love it." She paused, clearly debating whether to say more. "I heard about what happened with your parents. I'm sorry." "It worked out for the best," I said, which was mostly true. "And Bella told me..." Well, she told me why she transferred. I'm sorry about that too. The mention of Bella's name hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd been hoping for it. "How is she?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Sarah studied my face for a moment. "She's good, really good. She finished her degrees at Maine, got accepted to their medical school. She's in her second year now." "That's great," I said, and meant it. "I'm glad she's doing well." "She asks about you sometimes," Sarah said quietly. "When mutual friends mention seeing you at conferences or in journals, she's proud of you. You know, proud that you stuck with engineering. Proud that you're doing important work." "She is?" "She never stopped caring about you. Alex, she couldn't see a way to make it work back then. And now?" Sarah hesitated. "Now she's focused on school, on becoming the doctor she always wanted to be. But I think she wonders sometimes what might have happened if things had been different." "Different how?" "If your parents hadn't been such assholes," she said bluntly. "If she'd been braver, if you'd both been older, more sure of yourselves." We talked for a few more minutes before Sarah had to leave for another presentation, but her words stayed with me for the rest of the conference. Bella was doing well, but she still thought about me. She was proud of the choices I'd made, proud that I'd found my own path. It was both comforting and heartbreaking to know that I wasn't the only one carrying the weight of what we'd lost. That night, alone in my hotel room, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I looked up Bella's social media profiles. She was more private than she'd been in college, but there were a few photos, graduation pictures, candid shots with friends, images of her artwork that showed how much her skills had grown. She looked older, more serious, but still beautiful in a way that made my chest ache. In one photo, she was wearing a white coat, stethoscope around her neck, smiling at the camera with the confident expression of someone who had found her place in the world. I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to reconcile the woman I was seeing with the girl I remembered. This was Dr. Isabella Morrison in the making, and she looked happy, successful, exactly where she belonged. I was proud of her too, but I was also still in love with her, and that realization hit me like a truck. 3 years had passed. I'd built a new life, found my own path, proven that I could succeed without my parents' support or approval. I'd dated other people, briefly, unsuccessfully, made new friends, discovered who I was when I wasn't trying to live up to someone else's expectations. But I had never stopped loving Bella Morrison, and seeing evidence of her thriving life made me realize that I probably never would. The question was, what was I going to do about it? For the next 6 months, I wrestled with that question. Part of me wanted to reach out, to see if there was any possibility of rekindling what we'd had. Part of me was terrified that she'd moved on completely, that contacting her would only reopen old wounds for both of us. Part of me wondered if the person I'd become and the person she'd become could find a way to make it work where our younger selves had failed. The decision was made for me in December of my 3rd year of graduate school, when I received an unexpected invitation to speak at a symposium on biomedical innovation at the University of Maine, Bella's medical school. The invitation came from Dr. Patricia Williams, whom I remembered as Bella's organic chemistry professor from Riverside. She was now directing a program that brought together medical students and engineering researchers to collaborate on innovative solutions to healthcare challenges. Your research on artificial organ design is exactly the kind of work our students need to understand, she wrote in her email. Would you be interested in giving a presentation and participating in a panel discussion about the intersection of engineering and medicine? I said yes before I'd fully thought through the implications. It wasn't until I was on the plane to Portland that I allowed myself to consider the possibility that I might see Bella. The symposium was mandatory for 2nd-year medical students, and according to Sarah, that's exactly what Bella was. There was no way she wouldn't be there. After 3.5 years, I was going to see the woman who had changed my life, broken my heart, and never stopped occupying a corner of my thoughts. I had no idea what I was going to say to her. The symposium was held in the medical school's main auditorium, a modern space filled with eager students and practicing physicians. I was scheduled to speak after lunch, presenting my research on biocompatible materials for artificial heart valves, work that had grown directly out of my undergraduate research and would soon become the foundation for my doctoral dissertation. I spotted Bella immediately when I entered the auditorium. She was sitting in the 3rd row, wearing scrubs and a white coat, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked older, more confident, every inch the medical professional she was training to become. She saw me too, and the expression that crossed her face was complex. Surprise, recognition, something that might have been joy, and something that was definitely fear. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, it was like no time had passed at all. I was 21 again, seeing her for the first time, feeling like someone had reached into my chest and rearranged my internal organs. Then someone called my name, and the moment was broken. My presentation went well, despite the fact that I was acutely aware of Bella's presence in the audience. She took notes, asked thoughtful questions during the Q&A period, and nodded approvingly when I discussed the importance of collaboration between engineers and physicians. The future of medical innovation, I concluded, lies not in any single discipline, but in the spaces between disciplines, where different kinds of expertise and different ways of thinking can come together to solve problems that neither could solve alone. After the presentation, I was surrounded by students and faculty members asking follow-up questions and discussing potential collaborations. I answered as best I could while scanning the room for Bella, but she seemed to have disappeared. I was packing up my materials when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Nice presentation, Dr. Carter." I turned around, and there she was. Up close, I could see the changes that 4 years had wrought. Tiny lines around her eyes from late nights studying, a confidence in her posture that hadn't been there in college, a professional composure that was both impressive and slightly intimidating. "Bella," I said, and her name felt strange on my tongue after so much time. "It's good to see you." "You too." She glanced around the auditorium, which was slowly emptying as people left for their next sessions. "Could we maybe talk? Privately?" "Of course." She led me to a small conference room down the hall, closing the door behind us. For a moment, we just stood there, looking at each other, both of us struggling to find words for a conversation we'd probably rehearsed 1,000 times in our heads, but never expected to actually have. "You look good," she said finally. "Happy. Successful." "You too," I replied. "Dr. Morrison suits you." "Not doctor yet. Still have 2.5 years to go. But you're getting there." "Yeah, I'm getting there." She sat down at the conference table, and I took the seat across from her. "Alex, I owe you an apology." "No, you don't." "Yes, I do." She looked down at her hands, which I noticed still bore traces of paint under her short, practical nails. The way I handled things, the way I just disappeared, it was cowardly. You deserved better than that. You did what you thought was right. I did what I thought would hurt less, she corrected. For both of us. But I think I was wrong about that. What do you mean? I mean that cutting off all communication, blocking your number, transferring schools, it didn't make missing you any easier. It just made it more complicated. My heart started racing. You missed me? Every day, she said quietly. Did you miss me? Every day, I echoed. We sat in silence for a moment, absorbing the weight of that mutual confession. Sarah told me about your parents, Bella said eventually. Well, about how you finished school on your own, about graduate school, about the work you're doing now. I'm proud of you. Sarah told me about medical school, about how well you're doing. I'm proud of you too. Are you happy? She asked suddenly. Really happy? It was a loaded question, and we both knew it. I'm satisfied, I said carefully. I love my work. I have good friends. I'm building the kind of career I always wanted. But happy? I'm not sure I remember what that feels like. I know what you mean, she said. I love medical school. I love what I'm learning. I'm exactly where I always planned to be. But there's this. Emptiness. Like something important is missing. Bella, I said, leaning forward. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd made different choices? All the time, she admitted. Do you? All the time. Another silence, heavy with possibility and regret. Alex, she said finally, I need to tell you something. About why I really transferred, about why I ran away. Okay. It wasn't just about your parents, or the money, or any of the practical reasons I gave you. It was about me being terrified. Terrified of what? Of how much I loved you, she said, and her voice was barely above a whisper. I had never felt anything like that before, and it scared me. The intensity of it, the way it made me want to rearrange my entire life around you. I was 20 years old, and I was ready to give up everything I'd planned for someone I'd known for 4 months. Would that have been such a terrible thing? I don't know. Maybe not. But at the time, it felt like losing myself completely. And when your parents gave us that ultimatum, it felt like a sign that I was being stupid and impulsive and naive. So you chose to break your own heart instead of risking mine. Something like that. She looked up at me, and I could see tears in her eyes. It was the worst decision I've ever made. Bella, I know it's too late, she said quickly. I know too much time has passed, and we're different people now, and there's probably no way to go back. But I wanted you to know that I was wrong about everything. I should have stayed and fought for us. I should have trusted that what we had was strong enough to survive your parents' disapproval and financial pressure, and all the practical obstacles I was so worried about. It's not too late, I said. She stared at me. What? It's not too late. We're not the same people we were 4 years ago. You're right about that. But maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we're better people now. Maybe we're strong enough now to handle the things that scared us then. Alex, what are you saying? I'm saying that I never stopped loving you, I said, the words tumbling out faster than I could think them through. When I'm saying that I've spent 4 years trying to convince myself that what we had wasn't real, or wasn't worth the price we would have had to pay for it, and I've never succeeded. I'm saying that seeing you again, talking to you again, feels like coming back to life after years of just existing. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. But how could it possibly work? You're in Boston. I'm here. We're both in school. We both have plans. Plans change, I said. People adapt. If there's one thing I've learned in the last 4 years, it's that life is too short to let fear make your decisions for you. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that we try again. Differently this time. As adults who know what they want and aren't afraid to fight for it. Alex, I'm proposing that we start over, get to know each other as the people we are now, and see if what we feel for each other is still real. And if it is, then we figure out how to make it work, together. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her weighing possibilities, calculating risks, trying to decide whether she was brave enough to take another chance on us. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay? Okay. Let's try. Let's see if we can be brave enough this time." I reached across the table and took her hand, and the contact sent electricity shooting up my arm just like it had 4 years earlier. "Hi," I said. "I'm Alex Carter. I'm 25 years old. I'm getting my PhD in biomedical engineering at MIT, and I'm pretty sure I've been in love with you since the moment I met you." She laughed through her tears. "Hi, I'm Bella Morrison. I'm 24 years old. I'm in my second year of medical school at the University of Maine, and I'm pretty sure I've been in love with you since you gave me your pen in organic chemistry." "It's nice to meet you, Bella Morrison." "It's nice to meet you too, Alex Carter. Would you like to have dinner with me tonight? I know a great little place that serves lobster rolls." "I'd love to." And that was how, 4 years after we broke each other's hearts, Isabella Morrison and I began again. This time, we did it right. We took it slow, spending hours on video calls when we couldn't be together in person, visiting each other every few weeks, rebuilding our relationship on a foundation of honesty and mutual respect instead of desperate young love and impossible dreams. We talked about everything: our fears, our goals, our regrets about the past, and hopes for the future. I told her about the loneliness of the last 4 years, about the career I'd built in spite of my parents' disapproval, about the ways I'd grown and changed without her. She told me about medical school, about the guilt she'd carried over our breakup, about the paintings she'd created to process her grief and the way they'd eventually become celebrations of healing instead of monuments to loss. We were different people than we'd been at 20 and 21. Stronger, more confident, more secure in our individual identities. But the connection between us, the fundamental compatibility that had drawn us together in the first place, was still there. If anything, it was deeper now, richer, built on mutual admiration for the people we'd become instead of just attraction and infatuation. 6 months after reuniting, I made a decision that would have terrified my younger self, but felt perfectly natural to the man I'd become. I applied for a postdoctoral research position at Maine Medical Center, working with a team that was developing new cardiac devices. "Are you sure about this?" David asked when I told him about the job offer I'd accepted. "You're giving up your position at MIT for a girl, again." "I'm not giving up anything," I said. "I'm choosing to build my career in a place where I can also build a life with the person I love. There's a difference. And if it doesn't work out, then I'll have spent 2 years doing important research with brilliant colleagues in a beautiful state," I said. "And I'll have tried." "You're not afraid of making the same mistake twice?" "I'm afraid of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been." I moved to Portland in September, just as Bella was starting her 3rd year of medical school. We found a small apartment together. Nothing fancy, but bright and full of windows where she could paint and I could work. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. Our relationship wasn't perfect. We were both busy, both under pressure, both learning how to balance demanding careers with a commitment to each other. But it was real in a way that our college romance, for all its intensity, had never quite managed to be. We were equals now, partners, two people who had chosen each other not out of desperation or fear of being alone, but out of genuine love and mutual respect. A year later, when Bella was studying for her board exams and I was knee-deep in research that would eventually lead to 3 patent applications and a job offer from a major medical device company, I asked her to marry me. I proposed on the steps of the Humanities building at Riverside University, where I'd first seen her crying over her scattered papers 6 years earlier. We were visiting campus for David's wedding, and I couldn't resist the symbolism of returning to where our story had begun. "Alexander Carter," she said when she saw the ring, tears streaming down her face. "Are you asking me to marry you on the same steps where you first picked up my broken life? I'm asking you to marry me on the steps where both our lives began," I corrected. "Yes," she said, kissing me while half the campus looked on. "Yes. Yes. Obviously, yes." We were married 2 years later, after she'd graduated from medical school, and I'd accepted a position designing cardiac devices for a startup company in Boston. The wedding was small, David as my best man, Sarah as her maid of honor, Marco insisting on catering the reception despite being officially retired, and about 50 people who had supported us through the worst times and celebrated with us through the best. My parents didn't attend. I'd sent them an invitation, more out of obligation than hope, but they didn't respond. It hurt, but it was a dull, familiar hurt that no longer had the power to derail my happiness. Bella's parents, on the other hand, welcomed me like the son they'd never had. Her father, who I'd been terrified to meet, turned out to be a soft-spoken man who appreciated my dedication to his daughter and shared my love of building things that served a purpose. Her mother, an artist like Bella, understood better than anyone the importance of following your heart, even when it led you away from conventional wisdom. "You know," Bella's father said to me during our rehearsal dinner, "she never stopped talking about you. Even when she was trying to convince herself she'd made the right decision." Really? Really? And I knew. The day she called to tell me she'd seen you again, that she was going to marry you, she had this sound in her voice, this happiness I hadn't heard since she was a little girl. "I'm going to take good care of her," I promised. "I know you are," he said. "And she's going to take good care of you too." He was right. Marriage to Bella was everything I dreamed it would be, and nothing like what I'd expected. We fought sometimes, about work schedules and household responsibilities, and whose turn it was to call the plumber. We struggled with the demands of 2 ambitious careers, with the challenge of building a life together while maintaining our individual identities. But we also laughed more than I thought was possible for 2 people who worked as much as we did. We traveled when we could, exploring new cities and revisiting old favorites. We turned our small Boston apartment into a home filled with Bella's artwork and my engineering projects, and the kind of comfortable chaos that comes from 2 people who are genuinely happy to share space. And on quiet Sunday mornings, when we were both too tired from the week to do anything but lie in bed with coffee and the newspaper, I would look at her, hair messy, wearing one of my old t-shirts, absorbed in an article about some medical breakthrough she found fascinating, and remember what it felt like to be 21 and convinced that loving someone this much would destroy me. I'd been wrong about that. Just like I'd been wrong about so many things. Loving Bella hadn't destroyed me. It had made me. It had forced me to figure out who I was, what I wanted, what I was willing to sacrifice, and what I was willing to fight for. It had taught me that the best relationships aren't the ones that are easy, but the ones that are worth the work. Now, 8 years after that first tearful encounter on the steps of the Humanities Building, I'm Dr. Alexander Carter, husband to Dr. Isabella Carter, and father to 6-month-old Emma Carter, who has her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn streak. We live in a house outside Boston with a big kitchen where Bella can experiment with recipes and a workshop in the basement where I can tinker with prototypes. Bella is a pediatric oncologist now, working at Children's Hospital Boston, saving the lives of kids like her little brother had been. I run the research and development division of a medical device company, leading a team that's developing the next generation of artificial organs. We're both exactly where we dreamed of being when we were 20 and 21, except we're here together, which makes everything better than we ever imagined it could be. But this story doesn't end with happily ever after, because real life is messier and more complicated and more beautiful than fairy tales. 3 months ago, my mother called. I was in my workshop, trying to solve a design problem with a prototype artificial kidney, when my phone rang with a number I hadn't seen in over 7 years. For a moment, I considered not answering. Bella and I had built a good life without my parents' approval or involvement, and part of me didn't want to risk disrupting that peace. But Emma was sleeping upstairs, and something about becoming a father had changed my perspective on family, on forgiveness, on the weight of unresolved relationships. "Hello, Mom," I said. "Alexander." Her voice was different, older, more fragile than I remembered. I wasn't sure you'd answer. I wasn't sure I would either. "I saw the announcement," she said after a pause. "About the baby. In the alumni magazine. Emma. That's a beautiful name. Thank you. Alexander, your father and I, we've made some mistakes. Terrible mistakes." I sat down heavily on my workbench, not sure I was ready for this conversation. "Mom, please let me say this. I've been practicing for months." She took a shaky breath. "We were wrong about everything, about your major, about Bella, about the ultimatum we gave you. We were so focused on what we thought your life should look like that we forgot to consider what would actually make you happy." "What changed?" I asked. "Your father had a heart attack last year," she said quietly. "He's fine now, but it was scary. And lying in that hospital room, watching him recover, I realized that all the success in the world doesn't mean anything if you don't have the people you love around you. I'm sorry to hear about Dad's heart attack. He wanted to call you himself, but he's proud, you know, stubborn. He doesn't know how to admit when he's wrong. I get my stubbornness from somewhere," she laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years. "Yes, you do, Alexander. Would you? Would you consider letting us meet our granddaughter? And Bella? I know we have no right to ask, but, Mom, I interrupted gently. Emma is 3 months old. You've missed 3 months of her life already. I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I closed my eyes, thinking about the grandfather my daughter would never know if I held on to this anger forever. Thinking about the grandparents she could have if I was brave enough to forgive. I'll talk to Bella, I said finally. But if you want to be part of our lives, it has to be on our terms. No more ultimatums. No more trying to control our choices. No more disapproval disguised as concern. Anything, she said quickly. We just want to be your family again. We'll see, I said. But Mom, if you hurt Bella, if you make her feel unwelcome or inadequate in any way, this conversation will be the last one we ever have. I understand. And Alexander, I'm proud of you. Of what you've accomplished, of the man you've become, of the family you've built. I should have said that years ago. After I hung up, I sat in my workshop for a long time, staring at the artificial kidney that had seemed so important 20 minutes earlier. When Bella found me there an hour later, Emma in her arms, I told her about the call. What do you think? I asked. She considered this for a long moment, bouncing Emma gently. I think, she said finally, that Emma deserves the chance to know her grandparents. And I think your parents deserve the chance to know what an incredible father you are. And what about you? Do you want to meet the people who tried to destroy our relationship? I want to meet the people who raised the man I love, she said. Even if they didn't understand what they had at the time. So we invited them for dinner. Not immediately, it took 2 more months of careful phone calls and tentative conversations before we were all ready. But eventually, on a Saturday evening in October, my parents knocked on our door for the first time in 8 years. My father looked older, grayer, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with his heart attack and everything to do with the years of estrangement he'd chosen. My mother looked nervous, clutching a gift bag that probably contained something expensive and well-intentioned for Emma. Alexander, my father said, and his voice was thick with emotion. You look good, happy. I am happy, I replied. Come in. I'd like you to meet my wife. Bella, to her credit, was gracious in a way that I'm not sure I could have been if our roles were reversed. She welcomed them into our home, introduced them to their granddaughter, and made conversation that was polite without being fake. She told them about her work at the hospital, about the house we'd bought, about the ways our lives had intertwined and grown. My parents, in turn, seemed genuinely interested in getting to know her. They asked thoughtful questions about her career, admired the paintings she'd hung throughout our house, and listened with apparent fascination as she explained the intersection between art and medicine that had always defined her worldview. I can see why Alexander fell in love with you, my mother said quietly as Bella was showing her some of Emma's baby pictures. You're remarkable. So is he, Bella replied simply. I'm sorry it took so long for all of us to end up in the same room. I'm sorry it took us so long to realize we'd been fools, my mother said. The evening wasn't perfect. There were awkward silences, careful conversations that skirted around years of hurt. Moments when I could see my father struggling not to offer unsolicited advice about our life choices. But it was a beginning, a tentative step toward rebuilding something that had been broken for too long. As they were leaving, my father pulled me aside. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Several apologies, actually, but mostly, I owe you credit for having the courage to choose your own path, even when it meant losing us." "Dad." "No. Let me finish. You've built something beautiful here. A marriage, a career, a family, and you did it all without our help, despite our interference. I'm proud of you, son. I should have said that years ago." "It's not too late to say it now," I replied. "No." He agreed. "It's not too late." They've been back several times since then. Tentatively, carefully. We're rebuilding a relationship that's different from what we had before, but perhaps more honest. They adore Emma, which shouldn't surprise me, but somehow does. They've learned to ask about Bella's work with genuine interest rather than polite tolerance. They've stopped offering advice about my career and started asking questions about my research with what seems like real curiosity. It's not the family relationship I dreamed of having when I was younger, but it's real in a way that our old dynamic never was. We're all adults now, all people with our own lives and choices and consequences. And maybe that's enough. "Do you ever regret it?" Bella asked me last week as we were getting ready for bed. Emma had finally fallen asleep after an evening of determined resistance to the concept of bedtime, and we were both exhausted in the particular way that only new parents understand. "Regret what?" "All of it. The fight with your parents, the years of separation, the loans, the struggle. Do you ever wonder if we should have just done what they wanted from the beginning?" I considered the question seriously, as I always did when Bella asked something important. "Do you?" I asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. When I'm particularly tired, or when I see other people who have easier relationships with their families, I wonder if we made everything more complicated than it needed to be. "And what conclusion do you come to?" "That easy isn't always better," she said. "That the things you have to fight for are often the things most worth having." I pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling the familiar comfort of her body against mine. "I regret the pain," I said finally. "I regret the years we lost, the relationship with my parents that we might have had, the stress and uncertainty and financial struggle. But I don't regret the choices that led us here. I don't regret choosing you, choosing us, choosing to build a life based on what we wanted rather than what other people expected. Even though it was harder, especially because it was harder. Anyone can follow a predetermined path. It takes courage to make your own." "When did you get so wise?" she asked, smiling against my shoulder. "I had a good teacher," I replied. "A brilliant, beautiful, stubborn woman who taught me that love is something you choose every day, not something that just happens to you. I love you, Alexander Carter," she said, using my full name the way she had that first day in the coffee shop, when everything between us was new and uncertain and full of possibility. "I love you too, Isabella Carter," I replied. I love the life we've built, the family we've created, the future we're still writing together. What do you think that future looks like? She asked. I think it looks like more late nights with babies who refuse to sleep. More career challenges we'll face together. More family dinners that are slightly awkward, but getting better. I think it looks like Emma growing up in a house where she sees two people who genuinely like each other, not just love each other. I think it looks like us getting old together, arguing about whose turn it is to take out the trash and whether we can afford to renovate the kitchen. That sounds perfect, she said. It sounds real, I corrected. And after everything we've been through, real is better than perfect. This morning, I got an email from a student at Riverside University who'd read about my research and wanted advice about pursuing biomedical engineering, despite family pressure to go to medical school. The situation was so familiar, it made me laugh. I wrote back immediately. Follow your passion, I told him. The path might be harder than the one other people want you to take, but it will be yours. And in the end, that makes all the difference. Then I added, also, if you meet someone who makes you want to be braver than you thought possible, don't let fear talk you out of fighting for them. Some loves are worth everything you have to sacrifice to keep them. I showed the email to Bella over breakfast, while Emma sat in her high chair systematically destroying a banana and making sounds that might charitably be called singing. Think he'll listen? She asked. Probably not, I said. At least not right away. But maybe someday, when he's facing his own impossible choice, he'll remember that someone told him love is worth fighting for. And maybe, Bella said, wiping banana off Emma's face, he'll be luckier than we were. Maybe his family will support his choices from the beginning. Maybe. But if they don't, maybe he'll be brave enough to choose himself anyway. Like you did. Like we did, I corrected. Both times. She smiled. That same smile that had stopped my world when I was 21 and still had the power to make everything else fade into background noise. I'm glad we were brave, she said. Me too. Outside our kitchen window, the October morning was bright and cold, full of the kind of crisp possibility that had always reminded me of the day I first saw Bella crying on those steps, inside our house. Our daughter was babbling happily to herself. Bella was reading medical journals while she ate her cereal, and I was thinking about artificial kidneys and whether we needed to buy more coffee. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. This life we'd built together. It was exactly what I'd dreamed of when I was young and stupid and convinced that love could conquer anything. Except it was better because it was real. It had survived family disapproval, financial stress, years of separation, and the particular challenges that come with two demanding careers and a baby who apparently believes sleep is optional. We'd fought for it, lost it, found it again, and built it into something stronger than what we'd started with. And every morning, when I woke up next to the woman who'd once broken my heart to save it, I was reminded that the best love stories aren't the ones that are easy. They're the ones that teach you what you're truly made of. They're the ones that force you to become the person you were always meant to be. They're the ones that prove, over and over again, that some things are worth everything you have to sacrifice to keep them. And as I watched my wife explain something fascinating about pediatric oncology to our daughter, who was far too young to understand but listened with the serious attention of someone who'd inherited her mother's curiosity and her father's determination, I knew that if I had to do it all over again, the heartbreak, the separation, the financial struggle, the family drama, all of it, I would make exactly the same choices. Because this life, this love, this family we'd created against all odds and despite all obstacles, was worth every moment of pain it had taken to get here. And that, I thought as Emma threw her banana at the wall and Bella burst into laughter, was the only kind of love story worth telling.